Anyway, you folks are going to set the agenda, and but before you do that, I'd like to explain, because a lot of times I'm at your, I suppose your courthouse or someplace else, a library, or I guess I've never been in this room for an open town meeting, and not all of my counties are open town meetings, and this year I think only 3, because they came in February. So since the virus, and we didn't do much until Memorial Day and didn't do much that week, and then since July we've started up again to have these sort of meetings. And because you got to go by whatever rules governors set around the country, no more than 50 people or no more than 100. I didn't feel like I was comfortable if you could have 50 people at the meeting and you were the 51st one to come, you couldn't come. So we've kind of been doing a combination of things. A lot of places we've been invited, so just accept the invitation and let them decide who's going to be there. And then sometimes when that didn't happen, we would call various organizations and see, were you interested in having me coming around? And that's why you folks got called here in Clinton. So let me just say 2 or 3 more things and then go immediately to your questions. But let me have everybody, in regard to the questions, let me feel comfortable that, you know, there isn't such a thing as a stupid question. At least I haven't heard one. So you ain't going to embarrass me or yourself if you ask any questions you want to ask. But we obviously aren't in session in August and this week of September, mostly because of the conventions. But then also, when we go back, I'll go back Monday, then we'll be in session through the first week of October. And then I suppose that would leave 3 weeks for campaigning, and then go back after the election. I suppose maybe 2 or 3 weeks in November, and then 3 weeks probably in December till Christmas. And then that's the end of this Congress. So there aren't a whole lot more days to do things there, but we'll discuss whatever you want to discuss about those days. So maybe whether this was 100 people here or a fewer than that number here now, I don't see very many of the 3 million constituents I have in Iowa face-to-face. So I always urge you to do email most of the time, postal mail if you want to. People call in and they leave their name and address. We'll answer on paper, but that's the way I get most of my two-way communication. So if you email me, you ought to expect an answer. If you don't get an answer, write me a note and ask me why I didn't answer. And if I gave you the daily report, you're going to think to yourself, when I give you this statistic, Grassley never answers his email. But I get a daily report, and today we're 11,000 behind. But last spring, in April and et cetera, we were 25,000 behind. And I suppose a year ago, we normally 2,000 or 3,000 behind. But if you email me at noon, you won't get an answer at 12:15. So having said that, and I welcome to have state legislators with me, because sometimes people don't know the difference between what goes on in Des Moines or Washington, D.C., and you can help me answer. So who wants to be the first to ask a question?
Well, welcome, Senator. My name is Kurt Allen. I'm president of the Clinton County Farm Bureau, and here to represent the agribusiness people in the county. And I guess some of their concerns I've been hearing are, with the livestock price discovery, just need to see a lot more transparency in how the markets are being set. That currently is creating a lot of frustration amongst producers and mistrust between the packers and producers. Anything we can do to maybe get a larger percentage of the, or at least get more transparency so that we know what prices are being set out there in the country. Really appreciate your support of the RFS and the biofuel industry in the state. But anything we can do to slow down the SRE waivers, the small refinery exemption waivers, we need to. It's expanded exponentially in the last few years, and it's definitely hurt this county, being as we got a huge biodiesel or ethanol plant in this county and a soy biodiesel plant in this county. And transparency on who's getting those waivers and why they're getting them. How are they, what factors are they using to determine whether they're getting it or not? Would help greatly. And anything you can do to help the small packers, small processors, to maybe reduce cost for small packers to sell direct to consumers. Right now, their base expense is paying for a USDA inspector to come in, and they're having to pay the same fees that a large packer is paying, and it's hard to compete with those types of pricing. If we could subsidize that somehow to make it easier for people to go to their local locker and buy direct without having to process an entire animal. So if you have any comments on any of that, otherwise
Well, you brought up 5 things.
Yep.
And by the time I get to the first one, you're going to have to remind me second, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The first one I'll give 3 answers to. One would be my bill that I put in as a result of the Iowa beef and Nebraska beef producers asked me to put in. But remember, the national beef producers oppose it, and I imagine the slaughterhouses oppose it. But presently, 80% of the slaughter is done by the 4 biggest packers, and 80% of that daily kill is either their own animals or animals that's been pre-priced and promised delivery on a certain date. So 80% of that stuff's set up ahead of time. So then the residual supplier will be the independent producer that maybe won't be able to market that day, or would and if he did, he'd probably get a lower price of $20 to $40 a head. So my bill is pretty darn simple. It would just simply say that 50% of the daily slaughter had to be negotiated prices. So I would hope that that would help get the price discovery out there a little bit better if it's 50% instead of 80%. Then second on that same point would be the investigation that began with the Holcomb fire a year ago and got into the things where people taking advantage of the cattle producer because of that. There's not much of an answer about the fire and whether or not other people were taking advantage of it, but there was 12 recommendations on price discovery that came out of that. Most of them will have to be enacted by Congress. Maybe a few of them, darn few of them, can be done by regulation of the Department of Agriculture. But I couldn't go into all 12 of them because I don't have them memorized. But there's not a single one of them that I would see other than helping price discovery. Again, I suppose maybe the industry is going to be fighting them, and I hope we can get the chairman of the Senate Agriculture Committee to have a hearing on them and get some of them put in place. If they aren't, then they're going to be a outline for several things in future years for us to try to get done for the marketplace to work in that. And the other one would, the third one of the first points you brought up would be the investigations that are going on now by the Department of Justice, which seldom do you get them interested in looking at antitrust in agriculture at all. And I wrote on it, and I think other people followed up with my letter way back in March, and probably about June the 1st, to our surprise, they actually went to these 4 big packers to get quote-unquote documents, and I don't know what that what they can look forward, but you follow the facts where they lead you. I don't have an update on that. What was the second one?
The RFS waivers.
Well, he's talking about what we call gap waivers. They're just the regular waivers are ridiculous to a great extent. The 10th Circuit Court of Appeals said so, and I hope that dampens EPA's granting of waivers. But anyway, these gap waivers for GAP, some of you farmers know it, but the other people might not. So it doesn't even meet the common sense test. You're going back now from 2020 to say that certain refineries deserve some help against the high price of waivers for the years 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, what? So Ernst and I get on the phone with Wheeler, and Ernst starts out by saying, how come you even receive such ridiculous things? I don't know whether she used the word ridiculous, but that's what it amounts to. And he says, well, the law requires that we consider. Well, maybe the law does require it. The only thing, it's hard for me from that conversation to give you a certainty that he's not going to do anything, but he did say this. He said, even if they qualified, I don't know what we can do to help them because there are no REN certificates for those years that you can grant waivers on, see? So, and the other thing would be the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals opinion. What's the third one?
I think as anything we can do to help the small producers, the cost of bringing in USDA inspectors and that, if there's anything we can do for the small packers, I guess I should say.
Okay, now you're talking, in my part of Iowa, we refer those to the local locker plant. Is that what you're talking about?
Correct.
Okay. Well, first of all, there's a law that says that you can't sell that across state lines. And I would imagine 40, 50 years ago, that law was probably passed because the big packers didn't want the competition. I haven't looked up the history of it, but common sense tells me that'd probably be the motivation for it. Somebody's going to say, well, it's for the safety and the health of the people because we had bad meat going out of some of these places, and maybe that was true, but maybe it could have been an excuse for action that didn't need to be so sweeping. So then, there are bills in to amend that to make that interstate commerce, which would be the ideal way to do it. And secondly, and I visited in July a plant in Story City that was the first one to do it, and I think there's about 8 other plants in Iowa. There's a certain certification process you can go through to sell that meat across state lines. So I imagine that there'll be more. It's kind of complicated, but there'll be more of these local lockers that'll be trying to get that certification. See?
Well, thank you.
Okay. I thought you had 5. Okay.
You just covered them all.
Oh, okay.
First question had 3 parts.
Okay. Okay.
I'll add to your list, Kurt. Senator, thank you for your time coming today and visiting with us. I'm Greg Gannon. I'm the president of DeWitt Bank and Trust Company, small bank in the middle of the county. I've been active with Iowa Bankers Association. I've been in your office. Didn't make it this spring because of COVID.
Yeah.
And I was going to run with you this spring.
Okay.
And the spring before that, we got rained out, if I remember right, from your run.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you something. When you get to be 86 years old, I don't want to call it a run. You'd probably come.
Well,
you would probably come and shuffle with me.
so I'm 30 years younger, and that would be a run for me.
Okay.
So I'll look forward to getting a chance to do that maybe next year.
Sure.
We'll do that. I've got I guess a compliment. Well, first of all, I'm going to echo everything that Kurt says. About half of our business is farm lending, and I hear the same thing from our customers. Lack of demand for corn because of ethanol production being reduced, and my beef producers hear that all the time. They're just frustrated trying to get fair prices and getting cattle priced. So that is definitely an issue. So I echo what Kurt says on behalf of Farm Bureau constituents as well as myself. I farm a little bit on the side, and I deal with the same things. So anything you can do there to help would be great. My purpose of being here, I've got 2 things for you. I've got a compliment, and I have a question. I'm going to start with a compliment first to butter you up. want to thank you for everything you did.
He's going to ask me about tax and credit unions.
You're clairvoyant, clairvoyant. But I'm going to start with all the support and the that was given during the COVID, the early stages of COVID, with all the stimulus and particularly support for small businesses, and as well as for workers, particularly through the PPP program. And you know that was a nightmare for banks to get all those loans processed. And I was one of those bankers who was sitting in my office at 3 o'clock in the morning, entering data to the SBA to get those loans approved. It was a fantastic program. There was much uncertainty at the time, and I think there were some fingers pointed that maybe some of these businesses didn't need the loans. But I'm telling you, there still is a great deal of uncertainty, particularly as numbers in Iowa tick back up, and we see our state and other states going out with different restrictions on businesses and how to do business. So the PPP program was good when it came out, still is necessary. I don't know what's going to happen with the next round of stimulus, if anything, but if there's additional money available for PPP or a similar program, and even if it's targeted more towards certain industries, I think that that would be worthwhile. And if you could do something to get a de minimis approved to cut down the paperwork for us as well as for our small business customers, that also would be welcome.
Thank you for not talking about tax and credit unions.
Well, that was my compliment. That was a compliment.
Hey, before you go on, you'd be surprised the number of times that Secretary of Treasury Mnuchin to various groups of senators, and I've been in various groups of senators where he's appeared many times since COVID, he has really complimented the community bankers for making the PPP program work.
Yep, glad to hear that.
I've heard it many times,
Yeah, it
not
was-
once or twice.
It was a
many
major
times.
effort, particularly when we have our lobbies closed, and we had, in my bank, we have 54 employees, and there were 11 of us that stayed working at the bank all through it. The other 40-some were at home working remotely, and we got this PPP program implemented with partial staff, and we had staff that had their children were home from school, their spouse might have been on a different work schedule, they've got responsibilities at home, but yet we mustered up the help and got it done. So it was a major undertaking. Hope we don't have to do it again.
Okay.
So now you're buttered up. Well, credit unions. Credit unions. I'll remind you, there are some credit unions who did not participate in PPP, and there were some credit unions that outsourced their PPP program to out-of-state vendors. Just FYI, here in the state of Iowa. You're probably also aware that the largest financial institution in the state of Iowa is now a credit union, and that they made over $80 million last year. I'm a small little bank in central part of Clinton County. My shareholders probably paid $300,000 to $400,000 in federal income tax last year. We're a subchapter S corporation. So back to PPP and all the other stimulus and the $3 million in new federal debt or whatever it is, we got to pay that back someday. And my question to you is income tax equity between banks and credit unions on the table as a means to help pay back some of this COVID-19 stimulus debt?
How many times have you asked, well, you never asked the question regarding to COVID, but how many times have you asked that question?
Oh, every year for the past 10 years I've been to Washington to see it.
Okay. Well, then let me answer that question. He knows what I'm going to say. I'm not saying it's not a legitimate question to come up. I'm just saying as a process answer to your question. So I guess the short answer is no, it's not on the agenda. But
Should it be?
But I'm telling you how it should be on the agenda. That's when, let's say, credit union people come to Washington, D.C., of course not now, but when they did come, maybe a couple times a year. Bankers come 3 or 4 times a year. So let's say there's 7 days out of the year. Part of it's don't tax me. Part of it is you ought to tax credit unions. And nothing really gets, I mean, I think both groups think we spend all of our time about taxing credit unions or not taxing credit unions. Quite frankly, it only gets talked about those 3 or 4 days out of the year and very small groups of people. And until you get more of a traction to get the issue highlighted, it's not going to be discussed by either group.
So as a banking industry, what do we need to do to keep that issue elevated in the forefront throughout the year?
You know what you did? Yeah, I'll be glad to answer that question. And I wouldn't say this is the only way, but it seems to me the banks have done a good job in Iowa of getting it before the state legislature, and whatever you did to do that in Iowa, you need to do that in 49 other states.
We'll keep working on that through the state associations. But just for the audience to know, it's not just an issue between banks and credit unions. It's an issue for every taxpayer, every state taxpayer and every federal taxpayer, because we as taxpayers are footing the bill for an institution in the state of Iowa that makes $80 million a year and doesn't pay a dime in income taxes. Scott, I know your background. And what we're talking about is the largest credit unions, not the smaller credit unions that stick to their common bond, their common knitting, and what they were originally intended to do. Thank you for your time.
I'm actually a loan officer at a credit union.
Fun fact.
Well, there's,
But we're small, so.
you know,
And that's not the issue.
I know.
It's not the issue. The large mega credit unions
you know,
just like banks.
here's kind of what you got to think about the history of this. And I know history changes and conditions change and everything. He could have brought up the same issue in regard to the farm credit system. And if he had more time, he probably would have brought that up. But you know, back in the 1890s, there was a lot of people that couldn't get loans, so people decided we're going to kind of group together and see if we can find help the neighbor. And that's probably how a lot of banks got started when we used to have 50,000 banks in the United States. You know, it's the same way. Get a group of people together to help other people. And then, you know, then when you have the agricultural depressions of the 20s and 30s, the farm credit system set up. You know, kind of a cooperative system to help people that can't get loans someplace else. And these kind of get to be a part of the social fabric of America. And it's just difficult. I find myself all the time refereeing between my friends. I consider credit unions my friends. I consider bankers my friends. It isn't quite as bad now, but in the 1970s, I used to serve on the House Banking Committee. In those days, we had savings banks, we had savings and loans, we had credit unions, we had the big banks, we had the little banks. I don't know how many. I spent 4 years refereeing among my friends. That's why when I went to the United States Senate, I was never going to serve on the banking committee.
And you probably had 30 or 40,000 of those institutions, and today you've got less than 6,000. Today maybe less than 5,000 banks, and they've been run out of business because of regulation and unfair competition. And I'm done.
Good afternoon, Senator Grassley. How are you?
Very good.
Good. My name is Amy Brennies, and I'm going to talk through my mask because I've been watching everybody come up and speak at the microphone. So just a little bit of infection control principles here. So a couple of things. I will start out with a compliment as well. The CARES Act for healthcare institutions has kept us afloat. And so the infrastructure of healthcare would be in dire straits if it wasn't for the federal stipends that we've gotten. So I appreciate that, and you know, we're able to serve our community and I think provide very good service because of that. So having said that, there's a couple things that are on my mind today. One is, and this is probably for everybody in the room, we're not out of COVID, and we won't be out of COVID for a long time. So today, we I think are third in the state of Iowa in Clinton County in terms of our cases per 100,000 residents. So we have a lot of work to do in terms of our own containment strategies to make sure that we're not going to lose business again, or we're not going to have to shut things down again. And I will tell you that a lot of my nurses that I go and talk to and doctors on the front line of this are disappointed to a certain degree with the response in terms of lots of theories out there about this isn't real, the COVID is being overblown, until you see these patients that are in our hospital today. And we have about 10 today, and they suffer. They have significant shortness of breath. It is not a nice course, particularly if you are elderly and you're immunocompromised. So our nurses a lot of times will say, we wish we could have the community come up and see what this looks like, because we think that our community would be a lot better about the containment strategies if we could see it. So a little bit of I wish more of us would take it seriously and make sure that we're protecting ourselves and our communities. Secondly, we do not know what the long-term effects of this disease are. So we're already making strategic plans about how we're going to handle both the cardiac and pulmonary complications of COVID. We know if, even in young people, there's a large percentage that will end up with long-term pulmonary and cardiac complications. So I personally have had an aunt pass away. I know many of you have been personally affected by someone with COVID, but I think it is something that we need to take seriously. And I will tell you personally, I don't think Iowa has taken a strong enough stance. We know from the colleges that have opened up, it is, it's out there. It's very much a widespread community prevalence, and I think we need to take it more seriously. So third, telemedicine. So when we could not provide care and services for our community during the shutdown, if you will, we were given the ability to give telemedicine services and be funded for it, get paid for that service. In the past, there's been very little funding for telemedicine, and it's interesting how fast innovation can happen, and we can stand up telemedicine in a very short period of time if there's payment for it. And I think we did a really nice job of serving our community with using telemedicine during that time, and I'm hoping that it doesn't go away anytime soon, the funding for it, because I think we can continue to serve our community in a really valuable way. There's lots of things you can do over a telemedicine visit. So, and then I would just offer that I think COVID has multiplied our concern over workforce shortages in healthcare. We had a lot of people at the retirement age that decided when COVID started to come about, the fear and anxiety from it, they decided they were going to leave. And we already know there's going to be 1 million nurses leaving the workforce in the baby boomer population. And so I think that's going to just be intensified by this. I also think we have to worry about the mental health of our healthcare workers during this. This is tough stuff. And I don't think anybody that, could anticipate the emotional and physical burden of, and I shouldn't say burden because we love what we do, but it is definitely has a toll. So, and I would just have any comments, questions? You can tell I'm sort of passionate about this.
You didn't really ask me a question, but I would comment on one thing, or I'll comment on I'll comment on every issue you brought up if you want to, but you didn't ask me a question, so I would comment one on telehealth. Probably telehealth would have gradually caught on without the virus, but it's almost a certain part of the practice of medicine now. And I can't tell you what will be in a CARES package coming down the road, if there is one, and that may be a big if or it could be a little if. I can't really say right now because things aren't moving. But when it comes to telehealth, in the bill that I tabled, well, when I say I, part of it was out of my committee, and that part was dealing with telehealth and a lot of other things. But the bill that we tabled the first week of August or the last week of July, whenever it was, we had 5-year extension of telehealth, and we had $5 billion in that category. And also, I've had conversations, even if we didn't do that, I had conversation with Seema Verma that would indicate to me that she's inclined to continue those sort of waivers at least for a while. And I don't know whether the existing law gives her the capability of doing it forever, but we want to, as a Congress, we want to make sure that it's out there. Is there anything else you'd like to have me comment on?
No, I think, that's important because I think even with a vaccine, we don't know how effective the vaccine is going to be. I think, when we talk about normal life for us is going to be a while before we're back to where we need to be. And if we ever get there, COVID's going to be around and it'll be transmitted and very contagious. And so I just think that's going to be really important moving forward. And then, obviously all of the support along the lines of continuing making sure we have access to the latest treatments. And we know that we have had some success here lately. I just saw the study about steroids. We've been giving that for some time. Remdesivir and plasma seem to be the three drugs that have become more effective. There's a lot better chance for these patients with those treatments. So.
The last point she's made, if you read a lot about the COVID-19, you'll find out even within the practice of medicine, there's a lot to learn every day about this and what hospitals do, and whether you use ventilators a little bit less now than maybe you would have in March, and find some other way to get oxygen into people like that. And as simple as laying people on their stomach instead of how you'd normally put people in a hospital bed, and things of that nature. And I imagine New York's learned an awful lot about not taking people out of a hospital and putting them back into a nursing home right away.
Yeah, and that's another thing I would just offer. I know our nursing homes are struggling in our community. I mean, we've got a nursing home in town that's got a 50% positivity rate right now, and they need help. They need help and resources, and so if anything, I would advocate for them, some of our most vulnerable population as well. And there's a lot of downward, we transfer patients from the hospital to those long-term care facilities or skilled facilities, and lots of issues with not being able to transfer into those facilities right now. And, the readmission rate penalties that hospitals get from that, and so forth. So keeping in mind that some of those things may have to have some leniency for a while.
Like she says about long-term concerns about COVID-19, if I give you these statistics, you'd think that, well, we're going to take care of this before the end of the year. Like, for instance, the United States just we're purchasing them ahead of time because there's three different vaccines that are in the final stages. Like Johnson & Johnson 2 weeks ago put out to 60,000 people for phase 3 testing. But whether it's, that's just one example. So there's 3 of them that are in phase 3. Now normally you'd wait until phase 3 is done and FDA would decide to approve it, and then you'd start manufacturing the vaccine or the pills. But right now, because Trump put in place what's called Operation Warp Speed, these things are kind of truncated. So even though phase 3 isn't done, the federal government has moved to the point of buying, in the process of manufacturing, but buying so they know there's a market for it. 1 6/10 billion doses of vaccine. Europe, 1.5 billion. Great Britain is around, I think, 350 million. Japan about 250 million. So that when FDA approves it, then they can start vaccinating people the next day. Yesterday, the government put out an order to the 50 states that McKesson is the agency that's going to distribute this stuff around the country. So each of the 50 states, get your warehouses ready, or whatever it takes. They use the word warehouse. Get your warehouses ready so that if these things really prove out in phase 3, we're ready to start vaccinating people. But you're going to start out with doctors and nurses and other people and people that are older and people that have comorbidities, and you're going to prioritize it. It'll be a long. Maybe I'm 86 years old. Maybe I'm high in the priority, but if I'm feeling good, I'm not going to get one right away. But we'll wait and hopefully everybody will take it. But there's a lot of people saying that maybe a third of the people won't take it. But what she's talking about, if we got these 3 out right away and another dozen that are being worked on, it's going to take years. Years to get people vaccinated if you're going to get them vaccinated. So there's going to be some of this around for a while.
If we're really living in reality, we're talking about a good 2 years before we have full vaccination and immunity probably from this. So I would just offer that I think that containment strategies are one of our biggest things that we can do in our community in Iowa, and it's been encouraged, but it's not been mandated. And I would offer that I think we could be a little bit stronger about that. So,
but if you aren't willing to put in people in jail if they don't wear a mask, it isn't going to do much good.
And if I could add on your telehealth strategy, something that we've progressed in Iowa with is the Empower Rural Iowa initiative, and part of that is expansion of broadband across the state. The expansion of broadband across the state, so with the telehealth and with learning from home, kids that are doing online learning, and then also more people are working from home. We were able to not only put more state funding towards expansion of broadband, but also use part of that. Governor Reynolds was able to use part of the CARES Act money to continue to expand broadband, not just the access, but also the bandwidth, because with all of that going on, we need to make sure that not only you have the access, but you have the bandwidth to be able to do everything that you want to do. But so that's part of the
We
telehealth
appreciate
that we need to
that.
continue to
Yeah.
address. Yeah.
You could say there's nothing at all good about the COVID, but one thing that has happened, telehealth is one of them. She brought up the other one, distant learning, and then those two things together bring up higher visibility of talk in Congress about the broadband.
very good.
Yeah.
Thank you again. Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
I bet.
Hi, Senator. My name's Tracy Fromm. I'm working for the Chamber of Commerce, and I'm also a 30-year farmer. So because of the situation with China and the prices that we've been able to get for our commodities, last year, for the first time, I had to come and get a job in town because we could not keep going at the way that we were. So my question is, what is your take on where we're at with the China deal? I don't think we're going to reach the purchases that China was supposed to make on the Phase 1 deal. Are we doing anything with India while we're waiting for the China thing to play out? And I'd like to get a little more information on the carbon credits and the new legislation that they're working on to bring that back around again. And how will that work this time when it didn't work very well last time, when the market got flooded with the carbon credits and then they weren't worth anything? I mean, we're all looking for ways to add value to the land that we already have. And obviously, as you know, corn and soybeans aren't doing it for us anymore. We've got too much of it, but yet we continue to raise them because that's what we do best here in Iowa. We need to either find a place to go with it, whether it's not China and we go to India. But the carbon credits are a small piece of maybe adding something to our land to help us get back to where we can actually make a living doing what we love. So anything that you would like to share on any of that, I'd be happy to hear.
I think I'll start out with carbon credit, and then I'll go back to your first one, which I think was China and trade. I think that the discussion of carbon credit is just evolving. Unless you want to go to what's going on in California, and I'm not sure I can address that, but they sometimes kind of lead, but then the rest of the country doesn't follow along for a while. So, and it's also connected with the environment and global warming and all of that. And it's just now being discussed. There may be legislation on it, but I don't see that moving in the near term, for sure this year, but I wouldn't even say that next year or the next 2 years would move. But don't forget, for a lot of new stuff, it, you know, I could tell you a lot of bills that take 6 years to get passed that I've been involved in, you know, and some of them very sweeping bills, but you just don't get it done overnight. So then I'll go to China, unless you got to follow up on carbon credit.
Well, I had an article that the Senate introduced the Growing Climate Solutions Act, which would create a program to set standards for the carbon sequestration markets. And so I didn't know where we were at on that.
Well, like I think along the lines of what I said, it does have bipartisan support, though, and it does have support within agriculture, and that's an important start. But I think it's still so new that you're not going to have a critical mass of people getting behind it to get it passed very soon.
Okay. And just as a side note, I did travel with Farm Bureau in March of last year for a market study program in China. And
Thank you.
the timing at that point was we were on the verge of what we thought was going to be a completed trade deal. But yet here we are
Okay.
a year and a half later, and I understand that there are things that have been done that's besides the purchases that are sort of getting to a good end result that we're all looking for. But as a farmer, I don't think that myself or many of my friends can wait another 3 years. We won't be in business
Okay.
anymore.
Well, I'm sure in farming you haven't missed this, so maybe you misspoke because you said you were in China and you've seen nothing happen. We had phase 1 signed in January.
Well, we did see things happening, but we thought they were going to be done approximately at that time in March, and it took a while to get there, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
we still don't have the purchases that we need to keep the farmers
Let
in
me-
business.
You're talking about March. They started to talk in March, and by May, we thought we had an agreement. And it would require some changes in Chinese law. And when they found out that we weren't going to agree to anything unless they agreed to change the law because it wouldn't mean anything, they walked away from the table and didn't come back until fall then. And then in January, we signed what's called phase 1, but just the start. But it's pretty significant. $200 billion worth of imports that they've guaranteed. That's a 2-year figure. Of that 2-year figure, $80 billion of it would be agricultural products, the rest of it manufacturing services and energy. And then of the $80 billion that they're going to purchase, you'd assume that'd be $40 billion this year. You are right. They're not going to meet that target this year because their economy is not turning around like ours isn't turning around as fast as we thought it would. But they're significantly into the market. Yesterday, the American Farm Bureau put out a very positive report about it. A week ago Monday, and then 3 months before that, Lighthizer, our negotiator, and Vice Premier Liu of China that negotiates for them, they have teleconferences. Both put out very positive reports about it. China 3 weeks ago had the #1 sale of purchase of corn in one day for one country, breaking all records. the next week, the second purchase of corn that broke the first record. 2 weeks ago, 588 million ton of soybeans sold. They're importing a lot of beef and pork. Now they'll quit importing pork when they get their pig population repopulated, because they lost 60% of it because of African swine flu. And then they'll be buying more soybeans because they got to feed their own pigs. So it's pretty positive, except the only thing negative about it is that they won't meet the $40 billion the first year. Now, maybe 6 months from now, you'll read something and I'll be disappointed as well. You can say, well, Grassley, you didn't have it figured out right. So all I can tell you is what I know right now, and I feel very positive about it. And most people in agriculture feel positive about it. The results may turn out to be different. But then also, I'm not sure you're bringing it up for this reason, but let me tell you what I hear in Washington sometimes from some of my colleagues and other ideologues in Washington. Well, we're mad at China because they aren't transparent on the virus. We're mad at China because they're violating the human rights of the Uyghurs that they're putting in concentration camps. We're mad at China because they violated the 1984 agreement with Great Britain about Hong Kong. And now they want the South China Sea to be a Chinese lake where there's been freedom of transportation, freedom of the seas throughout the history of mankind. And they want to control that. So we're all mad at them. I'm mad at them for the same reason. I vote for sanctions on China because of Hong Kong. I write letters about to the UN about their violation of UN human rights with the Uyghurs and all that stuff. But it isn't going to affect trade. Now, if I told you I had a conversation with the president when we hear all this stuff about he's going to pull out of trade, I talked to the president and he says, no, I'm not going to. So if you a better bit of evidence than my telling you what the president maybe told me, he's got this protectionist in the White House by the name of Peter Navarro that says on television a month or two ago that we're going to get out of this trade deal. Well, the stock market goes down 400 points. So the president's got to immediately tweet, he ain't going to get out of it, get the stock market back and take the anguish out of it. So I think that we're pretty solid on trade with China. But now we got to move to phase 2 and get more out of them. But the main thing is we got to get them to stop cheating. I voted to put them in the World Trade Organization. Now I look back, I'm not sure that that was the right vote, but I wanted them in the tent, abiding by the same rules of international trade that 160 other countries abide by, but they've been cheating for 20 years. And so hopefully this is the start of this not cheating, not just on buying more of our products, but let's say, for instance, not stealing our intellectual property, our trade secrets, if you want to do business in that country, you got to give us all of your information, and that sort of stuff. That's just not right. Well, this phase 1 doesn't only say you're going to buy more agricultural products, it starts dealing with that. And then we had such an agreement, well, I don't know if it was as good, but we had some sort of agreement with China in 2011 that they never lived by, and there was no enforcement. So on this agreement, there's at least a process we can go through if they're cheating, that companies or our country can bring it up at the provincial level or at the intermediate level or at the top level. And then if we can't settle that, we got the right to put tariffs on them that they can't put on in return on us, like they did when their president put tariffs on, and in turn then they put tariffs on our soybeans and the market fell apart. So we hope we have a process of, what do you want to call it, mediation or something, with some tools that we can use if the mediation doesn't work out to both satisfaction.
Meanwhile, are we doing anything with India, for example?
Yeah.
How much, what can you tell us about?
Yeah. the president was there, gosh, 3 or 4 months ago, and there was some things on getting medical equipment into China or into India that they wouldn't let us in, and something on financial services, but no effort towards, if you're talking about a free trade agreement. We're putting our emphasis on free trade negotiations now with Great Britain, that they are out of the European Union. By the end of the year, we'd hope to have an agreement with them. We're starting our agreements with Sub-Sahara Africa, with negotiations now with Kenya. And then we want to go beyond the agricultural agreement, very good agreement that we have with Japan. We hardly ever talk about it, that was signed last August, and do more with Japan. I think those are our priorities.
Korea also, are they?
Well, we in 2018, we adjusted our trade agreement with China, and that trade agreement would go back previously 6 or 7 years, but it was updated to our favor. But it wasn't a controversial one. It was probably one that Korea didn't want to do, but they did it. Yeah.
Thank you. I've taken up enough of your time. I'll let somebody else ask a question.
Hello, Senator. Thank you for coming. I'm Maureen Miller. I'm the president and CEO of the Clinton Area Chamber of Commerce. Tracy left the farm to come to work with me, and she gets me this riled up almost every single day of the week, too, because she asks lots of questions that don't necessarily have answers, and she doesn't stop until she gets one. I don't really have anything that I need to question. I just wanted to say that I am one of those people who sent you many emails during the whole CARES Act process. I did get answers. They weren't always the answers that I was looking for or hoping for, but even among the tens of thousands, I did get answers to my emails, and I appreciate that. I also appreciate all the work that you did for my constituents, my investor members. On behalf of the small businesses, I say thank you for all of the things that the CARES Act brought to us in terms of PPP and loans and whatever. As a 501c6 organization, I was not eligible for most of those things, but fortunately, I ultimately was able to get an EIDL loan, which helps me stay in business, helping our small businesses stay in business. So thank you and everybody else who made efforts on that behalf for the CARES Act legislation. In the meantime, I'm going to introduce you to Case and Scott Fuller, who own the local Harley-Davidson dealership, who were recipients of some of that largesse, and they are going to talk to you a little bit too.
Yeah, before you leave, if there's a reallocation of the $110 billion that's still left in the PPP program, there might be some consideration for C6s.
That would be great. We would appreciate it greatly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello, Senator Grassley.
Hi.
I'm Scott Fuller. I actually own Clinton Harley-Davidson along with my 2 sons. I have my 1 son here with me today, Case. We really don't have any questions for you. I mean, we would like to thank you for that stimulus. You know, us as a small business, it gave us enough of a boost in the springtime that we needed. Because in our business, we sell motorcycles, and when you're in the northern states, if we don't make it in the spring, we don't make it all year. So, you know, we were able to put us up over the boost. It kept all our employees working, which was great with all their families. And by doing that, like I say, we were able to get up over the edge with it and get through our spring and summer, and we are now preparing ourselves to go into winter, which we're used to. So we'd like to just thank you very much.
Okay. God bless you.
Aaron gave me permission to add something to that. They received their PPP. They also received a grant from the Iowa Economic Development Authority, which they returned because they had gotten enough of a boost to get them over where they needed to be, and they believed that somebody else needed that more than they did, and they returned it, which I think is terrifically admirable.
So you have to excuse this one, but you got to let him speak. I don't know if you know this gentleman.
Yeah. I know this gentleman since he was just out of high school, right?
I was going to refer to that later, so we'll come back to that later. We'll start off, though. Leo Cutshaw's daughter said to tell you hi.
Is that right?
Okay, yep, and she was at our house the other night. Three things. First one, you were important in passing the Childhood Citizenship Act of 2000 that made life better since 2000 for everybody like us and thousands of other Americans that have adopted internationally. Not everything is right. Senator Blunt from Missouri is an adopted dad. He has put together some legislation to address a couple of issues. Governor, now Ambassador Brownback, he and Mary adopted twice internationally. There are some things to be done. Lisa on your staff has been helpful, but she defaults to this got to be done legislatively. And I'm just going to be real partisan for a second. My recommendation would be get on the phone with Roy, find out and understand the bill, and get the White House to do an executive order between now and Election Day. People of color, Asians, evangelicals, very broad support across America for adoption. And Roy can fill in the details of what's in that bill. In my mind, I see you standing with Joni Ernst, all benefiting from that positive activity and response, standing at the Capitol in Des Moines, a couple of adopted dads. I can't promise with 100% sure, but I'm pretty darn likely I could get the president of the Korean War Veterans Association to be there and others to provide love and support and say, thank you, Mr. President, for what you've done. Senator Blunt can provide you with a lot more of the detail. Second subject, you heard it here, and you and I have talked about it before. The single biggest long-term issue of economic development in rural America is labor availability. You'd hear the same thing from Aaron Cole, Chris McGowan, Bob Scott said to tell you hi, by the way, when I talked to him yesterday, Mike Ralston, Jay Byers, a number of other folks across the state would tell you it's the same issue. So here's my ask, is when we get beyond election and you're back as chair of the Judiciary Committee, and when the subject comes up about immigration reform or any of those sorts of things, I encourage you, or I ask you to say, I know a guy, and I knew him when he was right out of high school, when he was extremely super skinny, and embarrassingly how skinny he was, and not in the Beltway, walked away, not locked into that mentality, not a lobbyist, but let's get some folks that are practical, not inside the Beltway, because obviously whatever has been tried to get on immigration reform over the last 20 years, we haven't gotten there. So let's get some outside voices to get around the table and work on that. You know how to find me. I'm happy to help. Third subject, you and I have talked about student visa law. And I realize we can't make some big changes on that, given what's going on. But on Tuesday night, I got a phone call from the man from Oregon whose company bought the college campus here with the idea of making it an international school. And long story short, the issues with student visa law that you and I have talked about are why we're not getting any of that economic benefit. Right now, it's all down in Bettendorf. There are some things to do, and he said, Dennis, you put a couple ideas of how we could maybe kind of get a sort of thread the needle with federal law to get some stuff done. And I will detail that with more detail with Penny, but I wanted you to know he was incredibly complimentary about Penny. He said when Penny went to bat and spent a bunch of time on the telephone with the consulate overseas, working and helping and advocating to get some student visas done for some of those folks that unfortunately aren't here with their economic impact. They're in Bettendorf. But anyway, thank you to Penny for the work that she does. I'm here to help on labor availability and immigration and bring a non-Beltway perspective. And again, I think there's an opportunity to get the president, Joni Ernst, some real political support here in the next 60 days with an executive action. And again, when we're all done, because of this UNI tie, the UNI alum in my house needs a picture of you and me together.
I'll be glad to do that. Can you wait till we're done?
Of course they will. Thank you, Senator.
How much did Penny tell you how great she is?
We all know that. You know, I've known her
No,
for-
but how much did she pay you to tell me how great she is?
not a penny.
Oh, not a penny.
Not a penny. No pun. Well, pun intended.
Okay.
Pun intended. But you know, known her for 20 years, of course, and she's been a great advocate for this community. And Sherry's support of the build grant application. Sherry's support of the stuff with minor league baseball and trying to keep that here. They are terrified of you at the Major League Baseball organization.
Well, I hope they are.
They are. They are.
Yeah.
By name.
Yeah.
By name. They're scared of you. So anyway, Sherry's been very helpful in that too. Want to compliment Sherry and Penny. Thank you, Senator. I'll talk to you later.
Hi, Senators. Thank you. Sean Connell with Air Control here in Clinton, Iowa. Had the pleasure of hosting you about 6 years ago at our metal fabrication facility.
Are you the one that gave me the?
Do you still have it?
Yeah.
All right. Is it at the farm?
Yeah.
All right. Perfect.
Collecting dust?
The mayor said it was collecting dust, and I said it might be some bullet holes in it. So
No, there's no book. Now, I think it's the one that I got right outside my door as
That
you
could
go
be.
into my house.
it's about this big, State of Iowa sign with your
Yeah.
name and our logo on
Yeah.
it. So, yep. I just wanted to say thank you for your support. The PPP program really helped our company out. You know, we really tried to keep all of our folks on, and then kind of got in that in-between season. So it was you know, the swift action by the Congress to get that done. So we really appreciate that, and you know, we really look forward to your support of our state, our local, you know, Clinton folks and our Clinton County folks here. Normally, I'm sitting right about there when I'm in this room, a couple seats away from the mayor. So, thank you with the bill grant, and we really want to keep that minor league baseball here. So, push on those major league guys. So, we really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You bet.
And also, I don't know if you know this, I'm Matt Brook, I'm the city administrator, I'm just help facilitate with Aaron. We thank you for coming, but I wanted to also remark is we're the only county in the entire state that has advocate strategies that does stuff government affairs, correct? And I'm looking at DeWitt, Angela as well. But I just want to mention that because just recently, Marine is too humble, but the hotel motel tax, which is a state level, which these folks right here that are sitting here work together. So seeing the Board of Supervisors, seeing the congressional folks both at the state level, and then working, really it's been truly a team to see that all occur. We have other things on the agenda coming up for this year, so pretty excited. But what I want to do is give a moment in time for our state representatives and our Board of Supervisors just to say a few things as well for you. So
Before you do that, wouldn't you make more money if your title was city manager instead of city administrator?
Sir, it's all. my value is unlimited.
Okay. Now, is everybody up here on the city council?
No, sir. We're going to have to start with Tom down at that end, sir.
Okay.
I'm county supervisor,
Yes.
and always my favorite subject.
Oh, turn your microphone on. Same thing with the council.
Yeah. I used to be a council member too. My favorite subject is transportation infrastructure, specifically Highway 30.
Yeah.
But where do we stand on any infrastructure bill?
Are you the guy that told the people in Carroll, Iowa to ask me when 30's ever going to be completed? Well, you know, in the good old days, and that's prior to September.
I was there in the good old days.
Prior to, now you got me confused. Prior to 2010, we could help all you people all the time when we had earmarks. You know, Harkin and I used to get more hoorahs from our constituents for putting $1 million here or 10 million there, but you can't do that anymore. So the best news I can give you, because if the state of Iowa is going to get their federal dollars, then it's going to help you to some extent. How much of it gets to Highway 30, I don't have much to do right now.
You can drop a hint, though.
Oh, well, I can speak for it, yeah. Well, anyway, we got a highway bill. And so by March 30th next year, the highway bill runs out. So Ernst is on the committee, but Brassel's the chairman of it, so Brassel talks to me almost every day about, we got to get $93 billion. Now, what's magic about $93 billion? It's about equivalent to the amount of money that 5 years ago we thought the gas tax was going to bring in X number of dollars, and it's not coming in. So we got to make it up someplace else for a 5-year bill. If I can get that $93 billion put together, we're going to have a 5-year farm bill, a 5-year highway bill, and we'll have it before the end of the year. And if you want to be fiscally irresponsible, and I'll bet everybody in this room, when we talk about trillions of dollars for a CARES bill, you know, you all think we ain't very fiscally responsible. But if we want to be fiscally irresponsible further and forget about raising the $93 billion and put it in the CARES Act with borrowed money and take care of it right now. And I think some people are thinking about that, but I'm not sure I want to encourage that sort of activity. I want stuff in the CARES Act that's directly related to the virus.
Yeah, I think the highway, transportation's always worked on the gas tax, pay it, and I think I think everyone, it worked great in Iowa. We raised it a dime. I think it worked great on the federal end too.
Then that leads me to another thing you're going to consider an excuse, but I'll just tell you what the facts are. The easiest thing to do is like Iowa did. They raised the gas tax by, I think, 10 cents, and you're better off than a lot of states that haven't done it.
Yeah.
If we could raise the gas tax, that's what we ought to do, because it's the closest thing to a user fee, and user fees are good philosophy to follow on building roads. But both Schumer and McConnell do not want the gas tax brought up. So I'm not going to have a vote in my committee if we can't get it up on the floor of the Senate. So we're looking for other sources of revenue. So the one that Brassel first came to me with, and Cornyn was with him, is, well, we're going to put the gas tax on long-haul truckers. Well, you know how that went over. The truckers will pay more fuel tax, but they want us passengers to pay it too in our car. So that blew up. So we're still looking. That's the best answer I can give you for Highway 30.
Yeah. We need more transportation. We're getting behind.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is it my turn? So I'm a state senator, and so I serve on transportation, and we'll always continue to advocate for Highway 30 for the economic impacts that would have for this side of the state and across the state. But I mentioned broadband expansion, and I appreciate your continued support of that. And really, everybody in this room has to do with economic development and addressing issues such as accessible and affordable child care. Affordable housing is an issue in our state, and anything that we can do to utilize, get rid of red tape for our job creators and allow them to help grow our economy. I'm in favor of. We need to address the workforce shortage, and then also whatever we can do to help bring investment into our state, whether it be venture capital or give incentives to people to invest the money here in Iowa. There seems to be the perception that you have to be on in New York or on the West Coast to be worthy of investment. And there's so much going on here with all the research going on at our regent universities that we want to make sure that Iowa is on the radar for venture capital and investment.
Yeah. I'll comment on just one thing unless you want me to comment on more. We've already discussed a little bit about broadband. And I imagine if you were going to really do broadband up in a way where you're going to serve the entire country the same way, I would imagine you're talking probably $100 billion. There's something going on right now that's not going through Congress because the FCC has the authority to do this. They have the authority to auction off spectrum, and they're in the process of doing that. And that's going to raise $16 billion, and that's all going into broadband underserved areas. See, that's on top of what FCC already can put out some money from the tax you put on your telephone bill, and then the USDA has some money that's appropriated for that. So there should be, and I don't know how long it takes this 16 billion to come in and how long it takes to get it out, but we're told that's what it's going to be used for. Yeah.
It's great seeing you, Senator. I work with, one of your relatives. Some days he's a little tough on me, though, so.
Okay. Would you mind telling me which route?
Patrick.
Oh, yeah, quite a relative.
One day when we disagreed, he wanted to ask me if I needed to clean my cubicle out, so. So, but one big concern of mine is the storage situation coming into fall. I mean, there's been massive amounts of permanent grain storage just destroyed. I received a report from the Iowa Department of Ag that in central Iowa, at the 7 co-ops there, they had lost 57 million bushels of permanent storage, and I don't get a feeling from when I've talked to Des Moines and stuff that maybe I'm more alarmed about it than anybody else, but we're going to have tremendous lines, if we have at ADM and at the terminals, if people don't have a place to store, or I'm wondering if some of our rules concerning storage are on the ground storage are going to have to be loosened up just a little bit to give some more leeway to elevators. Because it's not too long and we're going to be harvesting. So that's just kind of one of my concerns out there, that where are we going to go with this grain when we start harvesting, because the storage is gone and will not be rebuilt in time.
We've already heard from one big elevator in Iowa, they're going to spend $500 million for outside storage because they aren't planning on getting their bins up until next year. So just as one example, yeah. So I do not have an answer other than what insurance covers. But even if insurance covered 100% of it, and even if there wasn't price gouging that there seems to be right now in this area for steel and for all the stuff, just fabulous people taking advantage of it. We're thinking about writing a letter to Barr on it because he's after price gouging in regard to the virus. We have a natural disaster here. It ought to apply the same way. So that, but even if you had the money with these increased prices and everything, you couldn't possibly get it constructed. So we're going to have to find just other ways, and maybe it's the ground.
Right, and that's what I mean. We might have to do some adjustments to our warehousing rules. We got to maintain number 2 yellow corn, and we might have to have some leniency on that when we, like I said, put it on the ground. And so it might be something we have to keep an eye on to make sure we keep our elevators opportunities or options out there. So,
Jen and my staff just heard you say that, and we've got a guy that is in touch with USDA all the time, and we'll bring that up.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being here. Jim Irwin, I'm with the Clinton County Board of Supervisors. I'm going to kind of piggyback on Amy's comments about with Mercy One. I want to thank you for helping the federal government opening up the telehealth. It's been used very much for mental health. And with COVID-19, there's been an increase in mental health issues going on in our area, but across the state of Iowa and the nation. We need the telehealth to be available and be funded going forward. We have a shortage of mental health physicians and psychiatrists to help us, and that allows the smaller counties to have that access. The other thing I want to touch on with that is the Medicaid and Medicare reimbursements. We have to get our rates raised so that it would help our service providers. We are way too low. We were doing a discussion just last week, just a simple thing as med management. The reimbursement rate for med management is $13.97 for a 15-minute conversation. We are reimbursing our service providers at a rate anywhere from $46 for that 15 minutes to $67 for 15 minutes. So that tells me that that med management rate is way out of whack of what it should be for these service providers. We just need some help with getting Iowa back up with other states across the nation. So, thank you very much.
Is the point you brought up about telehealth and reimbursement for that, is that a separate issue, or you're just saying it's because Iowa's low on every other sort of Medicare reimbursement that it follows on to that?
It's to me, it's two separate issues. Medicare's, reimbursements for so many, basically all the Medicare reimbursements for Iowa are low.
Yes.
So that's one issue. The telehealth is the other issue. Telehealth was not covered under any funding prior to this, and they opened it up because of COVID-19, because so many patients were in need of the telehealth, whether it was for just regular medical, but especially in the mental health. The mental health market was not really open for funding. So we were able to take some of our funding and do that. The one thing that's kind of, and honestly, I don't know if this is, I think this is more of a state thing. We are getting some CARES funding for mental health, but that's coming from the state, and they're not allowing us to basically reimburse for past expenses. We can only use it for going forward. But
my reaction to you on telehealth is not disagreement with what you said. It's just kind of a suspicion on my part that's going to follow along after we get telehealth established for sure. Now, this 5-year, if we get this 5-year bill with $5 billion to get it more established and get it established from a congressional mandate as opposed to a waiver, then I would say that there would be some, I don't know whether it'd be a year or it could be 10 years, so don't get discouraged by what I'm saying. It's just the fact that it's new, and there's some concern about quality, different from that if you went to the doctor's office. There's some, whenever you get something new in medicine and Medicare, there's always some gaming of the system, and I think we have to be satisfied that the quality is going to be similar to what you get, and then I think that's just going to automatically bring back equality of reimbursement. Or if there's a justification for not having total equality, or equity I should use, not equality, but equity, then we'd have to justify that. But maybe it would be total equity. But that's going to be based upon how it works out and get somewhat comfort with it, I guess I should say.
right, and to follow up with that, then is that really becomes an issue for in Iowa, we have the mental health regions. That would really come back to our local boards and that mental health region board and our CEOs to hold our service providers accountable to make sure they're getting a good quality service. Yeah. And if we, that's where it has to remain at the local level. Is I have to make sure that my constituents are getting a very good quality service and from my providers. Yeah. And if they're not, then we're just going to move on to the next provider until we get that. So.
Sure.
Senator Grassley, we got to keep you on track, but I just want to mention the group that came here, thanks to them as well, but you have to also remember, because you're from Iowa and you know the heart of Iowans is helping each other. So on August 10th, we had a horrible storm. The guy sitting in the back who kind of hides, Chance Kness, I'd like him to stand up real quick. He's our county emergency management. Great job, great effort. And we had a chance when Dave Lopesek came, the mayor and I took him around, and so did Senator Ernst. And one of the things that they noted was, well, where's all the damage? Because within probably the first 5 to 6 days, we had everything on the main snow routes cleared. And because I'll use Angela's PC talk to me, every other Iowan has a chainsaw. So people were coming out, helping everybody, and it cleaned up a lot. We had a lot of, even Dave Vickers, he had a tree go through his living room. A lot of damage, but people came out quickly, rapidly, got it fixed up and cleaned up. And I just think that shows the heart of Clinton, Iowa here in Clinton County. Paul Varner is actually a council member from Comanche. As we mentioned before, we all work together to make Clinton County better, and we are on a tear to increase the population here, and we appreciate all your support. And I want to say the last comments for Mayor Scott, as he's the man in charge, so I will defer to him, and then we have like maybe 2 minutes, maybe, if Dennis can get a photo, and then a couple others, and then we'll get him out of here. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, by the way, I saw the cooperation of a neighbor helping neighbor when I walked the streets of Cedar Rapids that first Saturday after the windstorm. Yeah.
Well, we'll keep you on track here. I do have a couple things for you. This here is the official city coin of Clinton. You can see on the back, or on the one side, it's got the razor's edge because we have a history in the sawmill industry, logging and things. And then this was actually designed by one of our students here in the local school. So, and the other thing here is the official city flag of Clinton, Iowa. So you can fly that high in DC or wherever you'd like.
Oh,
okay. But we thank you for your time. We appreciate you being here.
Thanks for everybody coming, and thank you for your hospitality. You bet.